I suppose I should start from the beginning and let you know why I decided to go on a 100-day rejection challenge in the first place. It all started in December 2023. It's a very long story, so I won't share the dot, but it boils down to the fact that I had been given a chance to apply for a specific opportunity, and I had basically flaked my way out of applying for the opportunity because I was too scared of the chance of getting rejected. So I kept on making excuses, and I kept on procrastinating and refusing to just do the damn thing and get it off my chest. And it wasn't until I lost the opportunity entirely that I had to sit down with myself and have a small self meeting. And in the meeting I uncovered that I had this crippling fear of rejection, and it was so bad that basically I eliminated and rejected myself from opportunities before I even applied for them, and I had to do something about it. So I hop onto the internet and I look for a bunch of resources that will help me to overcome this little fear of mine. I scroll through rejection therapy tools and all that stuff until I finally land on this book. The book was called Rejection Proof by an author whose name I never know if I pronounced right, so I'll just put it on the screen. And when I saw the title and when I saw the cover of the book, it just called out to me. So I got the book and I started reading it. So I have this book club that I used to run. It was a self-improvement book club where we read self-improvement books and we basically just help to elevate each other and to learn information that will help us live as our best selves. So I was about exactly one chapter in. I don't even think I finished one chapter in reading the book when I closed it, and I was like, this is definitely my kind of crazy. And immediately I sent a voice note to my book club and I was like, guys, I'm going on a rejection challenge. And the reaction was not the most exciting. Basically, I had to explain why I felt I had to go on my rejection challenge, and I invited some of them to join me on my rejection challenge because I felt like it was going to really change who we were as people and all that stuff. And basically, my first rejection ended up being from my own book club. So now that you have the most basic idea and concept of the background story and how I decided to go on my rejection challenge, I want to talk a little about what exactly is a rejection challenge, what it meant to me, because I feel like what it meant to me was slightly different from what it meant in the book. So in the book, a rejection challenge was basically about the author getting rejected as many times as 100 times, getting a no straight to the face as many times as possible. But for me, it was more about putting myself in situations where I felt the outcome might not be very desirable for me, and learning how to sit in that discomfort and to build my tolerance for that risk and that experience, and to just breathe my way through it and learn how to get through it rather than to avoid and run away from it. And it was also about, in my head, getting my own self-worth out of other people's hands, because for me, I think a huge reason why I had been so afraid of rejection was because I took it to mean something about me, and I took it in a way to relate to my self-worth as a person, even though that was never the case. So I needed to find a way to separate myself from whatever the rejection meant, and to put my own self-worth back into my own hands and teach myself to rely on myself for my own self-perception, regardless of what others say and regardless of the situation. So now let's get into the most exciting part of the video, where I tell, and in some instances even show you guys, some of the most memorable things I did in the name of my rejection challenge. I did so many things for my rejection challenge. Most of it was just me making requests. I had instances of very risky messages that I sent, pitching myself to people, then throwing my phone under the bed because I just could not. I went into all of this situation expecting flat flat out no's and outright humiliation, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that some of them actually turned out to be yeses, and some of them actually grew and evolved in the past year since I started my rejection challenge to become beautiful parts of my life today. And so these are the top 6 things that I did for my rejection challenge that I think stood out to me the most and that had the highest returns on my rejection proofness that I can't wait for you guys to hear. So let's get right into them. The first memorable thing I did, which has grown to be such a close cause to my heart today, is that I started my art club. I have always been such a huge fan and lover of community and the idea of doing things and going through life together. And so one day I had the brilliant idea to find other people that maybe I could create together with. So I was in this larger group that I was in. It was a book club at the time, and I decided to send out a message in the group. And mind you, up until this point I had only ever been a lurker in groups. I never really been the kind to like send a message out there and be perceived, because it made me uncomfortable. So that day I decided, sure, why not? I'm gonna do it. It's my rejection challenge era. If not now, then when? And I sent out this message on this huge platform that I was in, and I expected 0 replies, in all honesty. Maybe 1 or 2 max of people who are curious but not really. And I just asked if anyone would like to draw together with me in the new year. And so I sent the message, and then I like chucked my phone under the bed and I went on a walk. And I was very surprised when I came back later that evening, and I found, I think, over 14 replies, and that became the formation of what is now known as my art club, which has grown since that year to now have over 130 members, which is incredible. And it all was because I decided to take a gamble and put the idea out there and see if others were interested in sharing it with me. The second thing I did was that I carried my tripod and I went and filmed myself outside by the roadside. I had always wanted to do film or to just do something with the camera, and I realized that at some point it was going to be part of my life to create and to be perceived while creating. And I realized that that would require me becoming very comfortable with the camera and talking to the camera, and even doing so outside, because I intend to do vlogs in the future. And so me being afraid of putting up my camera and being seen creating in public was no longer ideal, so I needed to get rid of the fear. And I also have this thing where I believe if you're scared of something, you should do something that's 10 times scarier than that thing, like the 10 times scarier version of it, and then doing the actual thing then becomes like easier. It becomes like, oh, thank God, give it to me, I'm gonna do it. So that was my strategy behind this. One day I was seated at home and I decided I'm just gonna take my tripod out, because I wanted to make sure that it got me that attention, that very attention that I was scared of. And I took my phone, and yeah, I had this 6-foot tripod in my hand, and of course it attracted attention and people were looking at me. And then I just went by the roadside and I stood there and I filmed myself for an eternity until I felt as though that fear had passed me, and I was basically just teaching myself to sit in that discomfort of being perceived that way, and just separating whatever I believed other people's narrative was of me and my own narrative of myself, which was that I was just trying to make content and to shoot something that I was proud of. I got a lot of stares that time, and I think it was actually the time that I realized that people usually just stare at you for the sake of staring at you. It doesn't ever really mean anything. Yeah, that was a very bold one at the time, considering that I was an introvert. Needless to say, ever since that day, I have 0 fears around filming myself in public. Okay, maybe not 0 fears. Sometimes it gets to me, but like whenever it does, I always remind myself, well, now you want to be afraid. Yeah, that was a very nerve-wracking experience, but it made me much, much more comfortable with judgment because I was learning what it is about and understanding it rather than just fearing and running away from it. The third thing I did was that I went for a job interview. Around March last year, I was just sitting at home minding my business when this post on Instagram popped up, and it was basically of this company that I knew, and they were looking to hire people. And so, because I was in my sure why not era and in my rejection challenge era, I clicked on the link and I registered and I signed up, and they reached out to me not too long after, and they told me the dates on which to go in for my interview. So on that fateful Saturday morning, I took my CV. I prepared this CV on Canva and I went and had it printed out, and then I went to the job interview, and long story short, I got the job. And the job has grown to be such a huge part of my last year of my life. I've experienced so much because of it. It's taught me so much, but as what it has especially taught me is that sometimes what is yours will just find you in a way, because the experience I've had has been so elemental in what I feel the next steps of my life will be. I think that is a huge lesson, that what's yours is out there and it's just waiting for you to show up so that it can meet you halfway. The fourth thing that I did for my rejection challenge was that I went and asked buildings around where I used to live if I could film on their rooftop. This is actually very nerve-wracking, but I was bored on a Tuesday and I had a rejection challenge to push. So I got my tripod out because it was now my thing. I was the tripod girl, and I approached several buildings in the area I lived and I asked them if I could film on their rooftops. There were 3 buildings that I approached in total, and mind you, in the area that I lived, the buildings were very strict with security. They have like a management and everything, so it was definitely one of my weirdest ideas that I came up with, but I genuinely did want to film on the rooftops and I wanted to learn, is it like a guaranteed no, or is it a no that was just in my head? So I took my tripod to give me like credibility and make me look like I was a content creator or something, and I went to this building and I asked. And so this is a bit of a long story. It's a bit of a circle story, but let me try and phrase it as simply as possible. So to the first building I went, I was told to basically come back the next day because the management was closed. So I left that building and then I went to the second building and I was told the same thing. And I was like, alright, fine, I'll just come back tomorrow. So tomorrow comes and I go back to the first building, and then I'm basically told, come back the next day because the caretaker was not around. And I was like, you guys, stop making me run around in circles. I was annoyed. And then I went to the second building and I had to talk to this security guy and lady, and they didn't even want to make my call to the management to ask if I could go film on the rooftop. And there was this security lady and she was immediately against the idea. She was like, they're not going to accept. I was like, can you just try? Just try, I'm looking for a no here. It's fine. Can you just ask? And then she basically she makes the call and she's like, there's some girl here who wants to go and shoot on the rooftop. I was like, you can't say it like that. There's a way to ask. And yeah, basically the management was like, no. That one actually kind of stung a little because I felt a little judged by the lady when I was there. And there was a way that they made a point of looking at me, and I was like, guys, it's just for a rejection challenge. On to the next. I went to a third building, and this one actually made me laugh because the management was like, who sent you? Which was hilarious to me because why do we have trust issues this much? And so I gave it up and I was like, fine, I tried, and I went back home, and I thought that was it to the situation. But then I was surprised because the next day, that first manager building who had kept me going back in circles and then telling me to come back the next day called me himself, and he asked me if I was around and if I still wanted to film because he was around. And so I was like, you know what, fine, I made all the effort to go and do all of that, so let me just go and see what's up. And so I get there and he was actually so incredibly kind. He offered me 2 of the workers there, and their job was just to help me film. And they made sure that I found like the best spot on the rooftop to like have a cinematic shot. And I was so surprised. They helped me out for like the whole day. I had to leave at some point because the sun was working against me, so I was like, I'm gonna come back in the evening. And they were so welcoming and they were so kind. And the manager guy said that he doesn't like denying people opportunities, and that he was more than open to allowing me to do what I needed to do in the name of art. And I was like, oh, that's actually really nice. And that whole experience just restored my hope in humanity. And more importantly, how wonderful kindness is to experience, because I've never forgotten that little gesture of kindness. It did something to me. I was flawed. I was so thankful. It was just a beautiful experience. The 5th thing that I did for my rejection challenge was that I went out onto the streets and I sold hats. At this point in my rejection challenge, I was starting to get bored because I was realizing that I could pretty much do anything I wanted, and I was getting this sense of unstoppableness. And so I was thinking of something that would really get me out of my comfort zone and really stretch my limits. As I was thinking about this, one day I just so happened to be standing on my balcony, and there was this group of vendors who sold hats that were always there. They were the first people on the road, and they would try and sell hats to the people in traffic. In the book Rejection Proof, the author talks about how hawkers/vendors are usually the people who receive the most rejection and are the most rejection proof by nature. And I was thinking about that while I was looking at those people running around trying to sell their hats. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna ask those guys if I can join them for a little while. And as I was thinking that, I don't want you guys to think that I was confident. I was shaking in my boots. I was like, Sandra, please don't make me do this. But I had already been sold on the idea, and at this time I was starting to realize that when you feel like something scares you and terrifies you, that is exactly when you need to do it, because the fear is where all the growth lies. So I left my house and I went by the roadside. There was 2 tiers to this rejection challenge. The first one was actually getting the hat guys to agree to give me their hats so I could sell them for them. And the second one was actually standing there in traffic and watching, the people in their cars pass me by while I tried to sell them hats. So the first one was already jarring enough for me. I walked up and down the road for like 30 minutes trying to garner the courage to walk up to any of these guys and just ask them. It was an odd request already. I didn't know how to go about it, and thankfully enough, the opportunity presented itself to me because one of them saw me and thought I wanted to buy a hat, so he came to me and I was like, I actually want to help you sell them. And he looked at me a little strangely, but he was also kind of excited about it, and so he gave me his hats, and I was like, crazy how much people trust each other. Anyways, I had hats in my hand all of a sudden, and I was standing in the middle of the road in traffic on a rainy day, and I was looking into the eyes of people inside their cars looking all cozy and comfortable, and it was such a nerve-wracking experience because I did not know what to do. People made a point of avoiding eye contact and just ignoring you blatantly, no matter how warmly I tried to smile. And anyways, that was one of the most nerve-wracking things I did for my rejection challenge. I set a 10-minute timer to sell those hats, and it was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I have never been happier to hear a timer go off. And yeah, basically that happened, and then I ran away and I went home. The final thing that I'm going to be sharing that I did for my rejection challenge was that I finally, after many years, got to sing on stage. This was the one where I officially knew that I had become rejection proof, which is why I felt necessary to share it. Singing on stage has been such a journey for me. I had crippling stage fright before I started my rejection challenge. I got the opportunity to sing for a friend of mine when he was performing, and I stood there on stage, and it was in that moment when I was just looking out into the crowd and feeling not nervous at all that I realized that my rejection challenge had worked, because pre-rejection challenge me, I've been so scared. But because I finally managed to change my perspective from perfectionism and from trying to be the best possible person to just putting myself out there and allowing whatever judgment will come for me, and even actually pursuing that judgment because I now know that I can live in spite of it, is, I feel, the most confidence inducing thing. My friend was asking me right before the performance, like, how are you feeling? Are you not nervous? And I was like, no, I'm not nervous at all. And he asked me why, and I was like, well, I've done crazier things. Standing on a stage is like piece of cake to me. And yeah, I feel that's a beautiful way to end this 5 levels, the 6 scenes of madness that I have just shown here to the internet. So now let's move on to the main part of this video, the part where I give you what to take away from all of this madness and how to apply the information I used in your life without necessarily having to go through the strenuous experiences and that I put myself through just to acquire these lessons. So there are a bunch of intended consequences of me pursuing this rejection proofness that I got, that I expected, and then there are a bunch of consequences that I didn't expect but that I realized later came as a consequence of me doing the rejection challenge. So I'm gonna just quickly go through both and then conclude the video. The first unintended consequence of my rejection challenge journey was that I became way more confident than I had ever been before. I didn't really expect that when I first started out. I just wanted to be the kind of person who can just go for an opportunity without being worried about the rejection aspect of it. But then in hindsight, I now realize that those specific actions of going towards the fear is exactly what builds confidence, and I feel I have become a way more confident person just because of that, or at least more willing to sit in the face of others' judgment because it's not the end all be all that I once thought it was. The second unintended consequence was that I became a little more spiritual because I got to see how much bigger forces were always at play with every single thing that I tried. Everything that landed in my lap and everything that did not land in my lap, it all felt like it was this beautiful orchestrated game, and each piece was just moving exactly the way it was meant to move. And yeah, I just now have become this sort of person who's like, if it's meant to be, it will, and what's mine is out there and it's waiting for me too, and whatever I seek is seeking me too. It's something that you realize, I think, a little late in life, but doing this speed run of rejection challenge has helped me just to see at a much faster scale how everything is just working out exactly how it's supposed to work out. And so in line with that, these are the actual lessons that I learned from my rejection challenge. Number 1 is that rejection or acceptance is only data for alignment. People or things don't reject you and aren't taken away from you because of anything necessarily about you. It's never really about being better if you're accepted somewhere or worse if you're rejected somewhere. And it's more about whether or not that thing is the next step in your life and the next phase, and whether it is aligned with where you are going in life. And a lot of the times with rejection, it often just turns out that what we thought was our next step was not our next step, and our next step is in fact something much more different. Something else that I learned is that most times actually, it's never really about achieving the goal in itself, in as much as it is about the sort of person that we become in pursuit of the goal, which is why I personally believe in dreaming big and setting goals that others say are impossible, because even if you don't achieve said goal at the end of the day, the sort of person that you become simply by stretching yourself that big is always going to be way more different than the version of you who sets out to achieve the goal in the first place. And so nowadays when I'm setting goals, I try and look really at who I'm trying to be and how that goal will help me become that person rather than the actual goal itself and achieving it, if that makes sense. The next lesson I learned is that we suffer a lot in rejection because we try to assume what the other person is thinking of us. In the example I mentioned where I went to where I asked building managers if I could shoot on their rooftops, I remember that particular rejection, the second one of the building where I had been outright rejected. It was a fancier building of sorts, and the thing is, even when I was approaching the building, I was approaching it with a sort of complex, and I was like, they're definitely not gonna let me in. And the lady who made the call, the security who made the call, she had made a point of looking at me a lot. So I did feel very judged in that instance. And when I went back home and I reflected on it, I realized that rejection had stung mostly because of the judgment of myself that I had projected onto that lady. And I think that's what we do a lot of the times. We assume someone is thinking this certain thing about us, that we're incompetent, that we are not of their caliber, or just all of these negative assumptions. And that is what I feel causes us so much pain in rejection. And so I personally have learned to stop trying to guess what the other person is thinking of me. She could have been looking at my pair of jeans or how pink my t-shirt was, because I remember it was such a shouting shade of pink. She might have just been in shock. My point here anyway is our brains are not capable of that level of responsibility, and we just need to let it go entirely. You're working too hard. You're thinking for both yourself and for the other person. It's not going to work. So it's better off to just not try at all. There's so many more lessons that I learned from my rejection challenge, but I think the last one that I'm going to share for this video is the fact that you have to keep a sense of humor around everything. It has been an estimated 4.5 billion years on Earth, and I promise you that it has yet to be, and it will never ever be that serious. So you wanted something and it didn't go the way you want. So someone doesn't want you, someone doesn't like you, someone doesn't see your value, or you're not aligned with a certain path. Oh well. I think the best way to get through life and rejection as a whole is just to learn how to laugh at yourself and to never take it that seriously, because it never ever has been, and like I said, it never ever will be. So now that I have finished my rejection challenge, and I'm putting that in quotes because I feel like once you start a rejection challenge, you never really finish. It becomes a way of life, and it will be for me every single time I do something moving forward. I will always keep in mind the perspective of doing it for the rejection. I know this feels like the end of the video, but it's actually the start of my journey. Now that I'm rejection proof, I want to now use that skill that I have worked so hard for to put myself on the path of what I truly want. And I have come to learn through my rejection challenge that that path is often carved through fear and through chasing your fears and brutally eviscerating them, even embarrassingly at some points. So now, moving forward, I want to use this channel of mine to conquer another fear of mine, the fear of the undesirable outcome, where I document my journey without knowing where it will lead me. So that is my newfound clarity in line with this channel. I feel like I did disappear for like 3 months, but now I'm back, and that's because I have found my direction and I now know where I want to take this channel. And so alongside my creative growth content, I'm also going to be documenting a few more in-depth sides of my life, and I am welcoming you guys to join me on my journey and to witness the highs, the lows, what comes off. Basically just me learning to build my tolerance for the undesirable outcome, and hopefully that can rub off on you as well through osmosis. Otherwise, that has been my rejection challenge journey, and I will have many more similar challenges that I'll be doing in the future. So if you want to be part of that journey, be sure to subscribe. This channel is also dedicated towards promoting creative growth. And what else? My name is Sandra Vicky, and what else? I wish you a very great week ahead, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.